I mean, you're joking about it, but
I mean, we can go there if you want.
that is part
That's
of the what
literally
is theater
every.
is like, is it live? Is it Memorex? Is it if it's recorded, is it still a theater?
What
Uh,
is now?
That's
uh,
pretty much encapsulates every backstage conversation I've had post show.
so
What? Why
we
are
are
we
She
here?
always
we
Go,
are
gets so
Edwin.
deep,
we
Edwin,
you
are
know,
yes.
and
we are streaming now. Just to jump in and let Kyle know, um in case the audio is coming out.
I,
Oh,
So are we?
I'm checking it now.
And I can cut
Hello, and welcome to Thank You 5, hosted by Straw Dog Theater Company. Thank You 5 is a weekly panel discussion on the topic of what is theater, where we bring theater artists from around the globe into a conversation about live theater in a digital world in a spirit of gratitude and innovation. My name is Hank Boland. I'm an ensemble member here at Straw Dog Theater Company, and I welcome you to this episode. If you're watching live and you're watching on YouTube, you can head over to strawdog.org and our Thank You 5 page, and you can join the chat there. You'll find a link there so you can ask questions and vote on what questions you'd like us to ask, and see what our panelists have to say for what you want to ask them. And speaking of panelists, let's meet tonight's guests. Sarah, can you start us off with the introductions?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. My name is Sarah Bowden, and I am a playwright and solo performer in Chicago. I've worked with Rhino Fest a bunch of times, had readings at Stage Left, Chicago Dramatists, and I'm just formally wrote for the Windy City Times as a theater reviewer, so a little bit of a jack of all trades in there. So that's me. I'll kick it over to Eric.
Well, thank you. I am also very happy to be here. My name is Eric Esteban. I did a play at Straw Dog called The Merchant of Venice years ago and created some lifelong friendships. But I am an actor and stand-up comedian who lives now in Los Angeles, and I do theater and perform on stage here now. So that was not a very good intro, but I will kick it over to Mary Winn.
Thanks, Eric. I'm Mary Winn Heider, and I am in Chicago. I was an actor for a number of years, and then along the way, sort of pivoted and started writing fiction for kids, and very recently adapted my first novel into a musical, and that was an exciting new adventure, combining both of my worlds. So I will pass it to Cassandra.
Hello, I'm Cassandra Rose. I lived in Chicago for 12 years, 13 years, something like that. I'm a playwright who's worked with Chicago Dramatists, Broken Nose Theater, Stage Left Theater. I am also a screenwriter and an audio drama writer and a video game writer. And I used to do front of house at Starlight Theater Company back in the day. So that's how I ended up here, baby. Nowadays, I live in LA, and I'll kick it back over to Hank.
Thank you. You did so much more than just front of house, though.
I also did bartending.
Cleaning, side of house, rear of house.
Dramaturgy thrown into, yeah. Social media.
Thank you all, and it's so exciting to have you all here. So every week we go right to this, the big question: what is theater? Eric, what is theater?
The first word that I think of when you ask that question is storytelling. That's the first thing. I mean, that's the primal and basis of theater is storytelling. So for me, the most important part of theater is the story. So that for me is the essence of theater is us as human beings sharing our own personal stories, our own personal perspectives, but also in some cases sharing it through the interpretation of someone else. Like, that's the cool thing about theater, is being able to interpret someone else's words through your own perspective. That's what I've always loved about acting, and that's why I've always loved to do theater, and basically relish the chance to ever be on stage. So that's what theater is to me.
Awesome.
Should I kick it to other people, or are you gonna?
Yeah, you go. You know what? I don't need.
It's up to you, man.
You're
the
all-time
host.
kicker. That's not my. That's not. We're in a. Or are we?
It's casual.
Together?
It was casual conversation. So I didn't want to. Put any pressure on anybody to answer the question. How about instead of feeling like it's pressure or responsibility, you're going to give the gift of answering the question next. Well, you know what? I like to say Mary Winn's name just because it's a very cool name to say. So I'm gonna pass it off to Mary Winn.
Thanks. What a gift. What a gift you've given me. It worked. So I'm going to say it is when we enter into an agreement to find the truth through pretend. And I think there are a lot of different agreements there, agreements between the actor and the playwright and the actor and the director and the director and the, you know, and the audience, everybody. And then a lot of different versions of truth, like the truth that we sort of discover as the person who is interpreting the work in some creative role, or the audience sort of learning something about the truth about their own relationships in through what they're seeing on stage. So that's my big question. So this is I was thinking about it, of course, knowing that was going to be the first question. And the thing that I am really stuck on, that I am excited for us to sort of talk about more, is the at first I was like, and it has to be live. And then I sort of stepped that back and now I don't know. I have a lot of different kinds of feelings about it. So that's where I'm gonna wrap up my first shot across the bow.
Sandra, would you like to give a gift?
I would like to give a gift. I would like to give a gift right now. Cassandra, how's it hitting?
It's hitting good. It's hitting good. Last time I was here, I gave an answer about theater that I'm going to try not to repeat too much. I realized as I started giving this answer that I talked a lot about Peter Pan last time as being like a bellwether for what theater is when they first fly. It hits different on stage than it does in film. And I'm actually wearing J.M. Barrie t-shirt right now. So I'm on brand as always, but I did prepare a different answer this time. Both of these answers always come from the fact that I am lucky enough to now work across different formats and genres. So I'm not always in theater. And so for that reason, I have to carve out specific space for theater versus just what's dramatic, what's storytelling in general. And so the answer I'm going to give this time is that theater is a ritual. And it goes back to those Greek roots of being kind of a religious experience. But more importantly, the part of ritual is that it's worth repeating. And so I think sometimes when I'm looking at a story, I go, is this a story that's worth repeating? Is it worth putting people through night after night? Or is it something that fits better into a different medium because it needs to hit in a different way and not be in that repetitive space? So that's my answer for now. I can tell I'm already making enemies with Kyle and other folks, which is great. I'm going to kick it over. This gift goes to Sarah.
But I didn't get you anything. Thank you, Cassandra Rose.
The night is young.
I know, right? I've been thinking about this question for about 24 hours. And I was like, you know what? I think I know what the answer is, but I think for me, it might be a little esoteric, it might be a little out there, but it's based on a conversation that I had with my mentor in grad school, where he said, I don't remember what the context was. It felt like it came out of nowhere. He said, theater doesn't happen on stage. And we were like, what are you talking about? And he said, theater is what happens in the audience's mind. Because it's their perception of the events that are unfolding, right? And that's something that I always try to carry with me as a playwright, you know, when I'm building something as a director, like, is this communicating? Is this connecting? Am I giving something that's like engaging and enriching and making people like ask questions in the audience? And it's something I've been thinking a lot about too, to what you're saying, Cassandra, about doing theater like live. Does it have to be live, right? Back to your point, Mary Lynn, can it be online? And I'm like, well, I think there are ways to do that and still create room for imagination in the audience's mind. So that's where I'm at nowadays. It's what happens in the audience's mind.
That's a beautiful answer.
Thank Charles Smith from Ohio University and the playwrights program. It blew my mind. I've been thinking about it for years.
And I would say, other mentors that I'm familiar with, yeah, that's the sort of shit they just say out of the blue. Like at any given point, there's a lull. Theater happens not on the stage, but in the minds of the audience. It's like a fortune cookie sort of moment, right? And then they like walk away and you all, but it resonates, right? And it's resonated with you for years. Those are all good answers. Those are all great answers. I'm not here to grade answers, but because right, like, and so it's the elephant in the room, and we're all coming at it from different ways. I really want to, Mary Winn, you're down here for me right now, so I'm pointing down there. I do really want to dig into this live and what is live and what are our requirements for defining live. But to maybe move us there, let's take on, part B, like we frequently do here. What is theater in the digital age? Talk to me about what does that even mean? And since, Mary Winn, you were talking about live, and in the round robin, the carousel that is gift giving here of taking conversational leads, you are the next recipient.
I don't have a really clear answer for this. I feel like I almost feel like it's a totally different thing.
Okay.
Watching a play online, like watching a play streaming, it's a different, it's not film, it's not theater. It's I don't know, it's something else, because I feel like the experience, what I thought when we started, I was like, oh, maybe just for like quality of conversation's sake, I'm just gonna come down hard and be like, it's got to be live. But the more that I'm talking about it, the more I kind of feel like that, okay, it does cause some, I think, accessibility, like, questions and problems, to be like, well, if you can't get to a theater, have you never gotten to experience theater? That seems like a really jerky point of view, and so I have no idea. I have no idea. I think about the plays that I saw in lockdown, and I'm so grateful that we still have all, not all of the streaming options that we have had, but that some of them have continued. And even before lockdown, we had the National Theater. I mean, I feel like that's the biggest example of a company that went out of its way to make theater performances accessible to people who were absolutely never going to be able to get there. And I enjoy watching that. I don't want to suggest that it is a not a quality experience, but is it theater? Is it the same? I don't think so. Cassandra, you were talking, I watched the last time you were here. And you're talking about liminality, and I think that there's something about the liminality of the space when you are in an audience, in a live audience with a live cast. And Sarah, you were talking about the theater being in the mind of the audience, but I think that there's something, I also think that theater is that we're doing theater in rehearsal already. And so and that also, the liveness of that is, I think, also part of, like, wrapped up in all of that for me. Oh God, I'm talking for so long. I'm just going to say this. Did anybody see Staged? That it was on, it was, did you? Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
it's David Tennant and Michael Sheen, and it was at the beginning of lockdown that they were theoretically supposed to do the 6 characters on the West End, and it got canceled, and so then they met and rehearsed on, so we're watching their rehearsal, and that's the show, and watching that felt like the most Godot anything has felt to me in a really long time. And so there was something really magical in that digital theatrical moment. But then also, Cassandra, like you said, the calling things theatrical without calling them theater is maybe useful. All right, please say something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a hard stance.
Oh,
You're gonna take a hard stance?
Yeah. No, I feel like it has to be live.
Mm-hmm.
Because like during the pandemic, that's when I took that stance, because doing stand-up comedy on Zoom is not the same as doing stand-up comedy to a live audience. It's just not. It can never be, because I remember the first time I did stand-up comedy on Zoom, and it was me and Armenian dude who was doing stand-up comedy for the first time, staring at each other, and we were just talking, or I was talking to him, and then he told me his jokes, and we both didn't laugh at either of our jokes, and we're just us staring awkwardly at each other. And I said to myself, this is not, and then I've done stand-up comedies on Zoom since, and it's been great, and it's gone well, and you could even hear the laughter, and people unmute themselves and all the other stuff. But it will never be the same as a live crowd, ever. Just because you feel the physical energy of the people, you feel their breath, you feel when they laugh, you feel you feel all of that, and it can't be duplicated on a digital. And I think it's nice when like bigger theaters and they have the budget to be able to show their production, so that people who would never be able to see that production can see it. But as far as like theater for me and myself, I could never. It's nice to watch it, but it's nothing like sitting in the seat and the anticipation of being there, and then the lights go down. And like, I remember Louis C.K. said that every time he goes to a Broadway show and he sits down in the seat and the lights go down, he tears come to his eyes. And I don't know that you can have that experience on the digital or on a screen. It really does have to kind of surround you and feel you, and you feel the energy. That's me. That's my stance.
I want to jump in, or you, Sarah. Sarah, jump in, Sarah.
Keep it short so that you can go next. So, I did a lot of digital theater, like right at the start of the pandemic, and there were times that it worked great, because it was really simple. Like, it was you delivering a monologue to the camera, and then there were times where it was a lot of edited together stuff, and it was like, unmute here, turn your camera off here, and we're gonna have all of these like backgrounds, and it's gonna kind of cut off half your face, but it's cool because it's gonna make us feel like we're there. And I felt like the times where it felt, if not theater adjacent, were times where it was kept really simple, and what happened with it was that within your own home space, you found a way to add a little bit of theatricality in there. Like, this is just gonna out me as a Sondheim nerd, but like when Sondheim's birthday concert happened right at the start of the pandemic, there was I made my boyfriend and my parents watch it with me. It was awesome. It was fine. It was like Neil Patrick Harris and every other celebrity singing, Sondheim songs. And then this group of actors who I don't know, like they weren't famous, they were just like working Broadway actors, did Someone in a Tree. And that is 3 people from 3 different timelines. And they edited it together so that they were looking up and down at each other on the screen. And like halfway through the song, I just burst into tears. I was like, theater! I love it. I think it's possible. I think it's doable, but like I'm vibing on what you're saying, Eric and Mary Wynn, because like my favorite time in a theater with other people is when it's quiet. Like when everyone's like really engaged and you're just like, oh, what's gonna happen? Because like it's the feeling together that's really valuable, right? You know, and I did really struggle with stuff that was trying to make it more movie-like. The stuff that was simpler felt like I could connect with it. That was what I was going to say. To you, Cassandra.
To me, hello. I want to talk about that. I feel like there's a difference between the question of what is digital theater and what is theater in the digital age. If we go like full dramaturg teacher on you right now, and I think if we're talking more about the latter rather than like how do we make things more accessible, how do we archive things, how do we make it so that theater has a life that can be spread to more people? Because I think that question is more about like, well, how do I share? I've been doing a lot of wedding planning right now. So it's like, well, how do I share my wedding with people? And it's like, you can take pictures of your wedding, you can take video of your wedding, but people are still doing weddings in person. And I think it's similar with theater of like, it's just another tool to share. But if we're answering the question, what is theater in the digital age? I think we need to look to other mediums and medias that are being used in the digital age and be like, how can theater take things from these and make them better? Obviously, I'm a little biased because I am also writing for video games and I'm also writing for screenplays. And this is not to say that theater in its entirety needs to change. There's a Neil Gaiman quote where he does in his nonfiction book View from the Cheap Seats, where he talks about how books will always be around because books are like sharks. They have a very specific place in the food chain and the ecosystem. They're not going anywhere. And I feel the same way for theater. However, we could improve theater's diet. We could improve the things that it chomps on in the food chain, which I guess in this metaphor would be the audience, by thinking about how do we make it more attractive to people. I can't remember now who it was who was talking earlier about it being a conversation. It was Sarah and her instructor that was talking about theaters in the mind of the person who's watching it. That's where the theater lives, not on stage. And in video games, we talk a lot about like the author is not the person who's writing it or the team of writers or all the narrative designers. It's the person who's playing it as much as the people that are designing it, because they're making the actionable choices of how their character is. I mean, you can get very like, you can get very specific with it. Like if you're doing some of the games out there that are like, this character will remember this choice, or you can go full chaotic like Last of Us or Grand Theft Auto or things like that. But it's still like you are making the story. And the final thing I'll say about that is in
I cried 3 times in Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm just gonna say,
because it was you were in
me.
it.
I was Arthur.
It wasn't just you seeing yourself.
I straight up cried, tears like
you were there.
Weeping. It was
100%.
For real. It was it's great storytelling in the video games.
And part of that is that video games, there's something called story stacks that we do, where the foundational thing, the thing that's the least flexible, that always has to be true no matter what we're doing in the rest of it, is satisfying the fantasy of the person who's playing it. So like in Grand Theft Auto, if you got the new installment of that and they were like, hey, you're not going to steal cars. You are going to run, you're going to run a police station or something like that. Or even more banal, like you're going to be the fruit stand that gets knocked over. People would be like, Eric, and they get really upset and be like, I don't want to buy this. I have been betrayed. And I think sometimes in theater, we forget, hey, when we're choosing our plays, when we're telling our stories, when we're inviting our audience in, they have an expectation, they have a fantasy for how their night at the theater is going to go. And acknowledging that there are other story forms that are more satisfying to meeting those fantasies than theater sometimes can be is something that we need to draw into the stories that we're creating as well. That's my soapbox. That's my time. Thank you very much.
So you're saying a version of Grand Theft Auto where your player has their car stolen and you spend weeks filling out paperwork it's not gonna sell.
It's not gonna hit quite right in the same way
stop
that
developing
people are like,
it then.
I'm going to do Shakespeare, but I'm going to do it in a way Shakespeare didn't intend in this weird way is not going to satisfy the fantasy of people that are going to Shakespeare, except for those hardcore nerds that have been in so much Shakespeare that they're like, I need a new hit. I need a new
But what if I
fantasy
said
so
it in
can
the
feel
Old
something."
West?
You
Or
know
in
what? I
space?
hadn't thought about that. You make good points.
Yeah. So enough snarky baloney. Here's what I sort of want to ask though, because I've got a room full of people here with me. Is this live?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, it's live. It's network. It's on the network. But is it? It's not like, it's not theater though.
No, it's not.
It's a Zoom meeting.
Yeah,
and it's cool. I'm happy that I can network and talk with people from across the country, across the world, on screen, and like the fact that I can see my old buddy Kyle, and just hanging out. I mean, it's just nice. So I don't not like technology, but at the same time, I don't know that it's theater. It's a Zoom meeting.
So
like Cassandra was saying, there's a distinction between the different mediums.
I 100% agree with you. I am curious then, because I also was sort of want to like try to put all of these ideas that you all just had into one giant magic ball that we can solve this question with, right? That's what we're all here to do.
We're here to save theater in a way that nobody else has. Everyone's been asking the question, but nobody's been giving an answer. Okay.
I'm actually just here to plug my special.
Oh, tell us about your special, Eric.
Well, okay, great. I went back home. This was the last time I saw Kyle in person. We had a drink at my favorite bar, the Green Mill, after I filmed my first full 1 hour comedy special. 4x3 Productions reached out to me on Instagram, and they were like, would you like to come home and perform and co-produce your 1 hour special? And I was like, yeah. And so it's currently right now streaming on YouTube. I'll put it in the chat if you guys want to watch it. It's called Miscellaneous Brown. Yes, we have merch. You can just put Miscellaneous Brown in the search and it'll come right up. And it's doing pretty well. They're shopping it to Tubi, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, and as far as like, just to kind of like bring it back to what we were talking about, I've always there's always a weird thing with me as far as being an actor and a stand-up comedian, because I hit stand-up, like I've only been doing stand-up for a few years now, and I kind of hit the ground really running. Like people would like my first show at the Comedy Store, they'd be like, oh, how are you so comfortable on stage? I'm like, well, I stuffed my pants and did a Latin accent in Shakespeare from A Merchant of Venice at Straw Dog Theater. So I mean, I can do anything you want. Theater gives you those. I just remember Kyle sharing the picture with me, and I didn't realize I stuffed my pants, because there's no way that was there was a sock in there. There was no way that was really me. I mean, I'm allowed.
I'm going to help you out here, Eric, because I have another question. I'm going to help. So Green Mill holds about 75 people, right? Maybe 150 if nobody's paying attention. I've been in there when there's been a ton of people. I bet that's a great, tight, small room for comedy. I bet once you get one or two good laughers in that room, it's on fire, right?
I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. You're like, they tell me. No, but
the good comedians tell me that.
How? But now you have a video, a special.
Yeah.
And I'm going to watch that at home.
You should.
Alone. Is that stand-up?
Well, is Eddie Murphy Delirious stand-up?
I don't know. But right, I'm trying to get to this idea, right? Like
I feel like in the same way that if, say, a Broadway show were to capture their performance on stage, or Chris Rock were to capture his performance on live stage, I think it would be the same thing. It's like documenting a live performance. So is it necessarily, it's not, I don't know that I will ever be able to duplicate the feelings that I felt live on stage. No matter how many times I try to rewatch the special, I'll never feel those feelings the way that I felt them when I was actually physically on the stage.
I want to try to figure out, because this is thank you. I want to go with this idea, and again, Mary Winn, you're down here, so I keep pointing down here, like I'm gonna like you're the youngest Brady, and I'm pointing at you. You now write novels. How is writing like that relationship, right? Like the relationship of a reader of a novel, and by the way, I'm going to plug yours. I'm going to, on what is that, Friday the 15th of September, you have an event for your newest book, and where you will likely read some of it.
I will.
Awesome.
Yep.
But suddenly you reading live is a different relationship for me in that room to the material, right? Like, so I'm trying to tie that back to it happens in the audience's head, right? Yeah. I just and Cassandra, you're writing so many different things for so many different audiences, right? And navigating their headspace. So I feel like there's something there, and I can't quite put my hook in it, but does the audience have to be live for it to be live? Or does the material presented have to be live for it to be live?
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
And now I'm going to shut up, and you guys can unpack all of that and unknot the Gordian knot I just put together.
A minute ago, when you first asked Eric if it was if the stand-up show was live, or you were asking about this, is it live? And the thing that I thought in that moment was, it's live, but it's not alive. And that's such a syntactical difference that doesn't really make sense. But to me, somehow it sort of does. There's something about watching. So I was thinking about Into the Woods, and that production of Into the Woods that none of us will ever see live, that that maybe a number of us have seen. The Bernadette Peters one, that I love and am devoted to, and it is the reason that I think of that show as one of my favorite shows. And yet I wouldn't say that I saw that production. I would say I saw the video of that production. And so I saw a video of it being performed live. That's no different from me watching a video of it being performed live, watching the live video feed versus watching the recorded video later. But me being in the same room, I think you said this, Eric, that we're breathing the same air. There's something about that that's almost like plant life, that where we're all the same. We're all the same thing. We're the Borg suddenly. We're like, play.
Like, have you ever seen the Netflix documentary Fantastic Fungi? No,
but yes. Yes.
Where they talk about the mycorrhizal network of fungi that is connected all under the earth, and it connects the roots together, and the trees communicate through this network, and everything's all connected through this like root system. I almost feel that same way with what I was talking about with theater, where when you're live on stage and all these people are all there collectively, physically, emanating their energy, there's nothing that can duplicate that. It's the same way that in the root system, there's no way you can duplicate. Maybe you can take a video of the roots and watch them, but you're not going to feel those connections and those, chemical reactions and all that stuff. That's not going to happen. You're going to see a video of dirt. Whereas, when you're, I'm sorry, I watched a lot of growing videos because I've been doing a lot of growing.
Well, also
Gardening.
going off of that, part of it being a live performance in front of you for theater, that energy is you being like, are they going to successfully tell this story? Because when you start a video, the answer is yes. When you start a video game,
you already know it's
you
good.
might
It's gonna
fail,
finish.
but you might get some restarts. And in theater, you're like, are they going to be able to pull it off? Are they going to make the magic trick work? And yeah, most of the time the answer is yes, but it's still that thing of like, well, are they going to do it? And or how are they going to do it? That makes it so exciting to be in the room and live with them. I think a lot about neo-futurists when I start talking about this, of just them running around and being like, we're going to try and tell 30 short plays in 60 minutes. And the audience is like, we're going to see 30 plays in 60 minutes and we're going to yell out our favorite numbers and we're going to together make this happen. But also at the same time, like you've seen plays with the neo-futurists where you're like, that didn't go as planned. And then you're like, we're going to do another play. And just that energy is cranked up to 11. And that's what I love about live theater.
Well, and also
Neo-futurist is. I'm sorry, but I was just going to say Neo-futurist is brilliant. They're, oh my God, it just made me think of the essence of Chicago theater is Neo-futurist. It's so good, so good. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
That's okay. Plus, you get a pizza sometimes when they do all the plays.
Yeah,
little tiny square pizza.
I don't know how many times that Too Much Light Makes a Baby Go Blind. I don't know how many times I went to that show. It was almost like a standard first date, and they would be like, Eric, are you Kylie? Eric, you brought another girl to this place. How many different
I get it though. Like it puts together a lot of things about what I think of as like quintessentially Chicago theater, right? Like it's very DIY. I remember one of the plays I watched there was like someone walking along a beach, and then at the end they just stepped into it was like a plastic tub of water. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I was like, oh my God, never change. But to kind of piggyback off what you're all talking about, like there was that study that was like 5 or 6 years ago that came out that studied people's heartbeats before and during a performance, and how the longer a performance went on, and it was theater, but it could also account for like other kinds of performance, like, and their heartbeat synced up because it's like we're social beings, right? We like to be with other people. And the thing that's really tricky about trying to engage with the screenwriters, the other person is not physically there with you, so you can't like engage with their energy in the same way. But there's also the fact that like no one is physically there with you, and your mind is trying to trick you that they are. So I think that it becomes less alive to us actually doing it, because we're working overtime to be like, I'm pretending there's someone here with me, and they're not, and it takes about 3 times the amount of energy to do that.
It's like the psychology thing where they're like, don't just put your babies in front of the TV, or don't just play a radio or music, because they don't get the same language acquisition as they do with a person interacting with them in the room. And I think we carry that psychology throughout life, and that it tickles that part of our brain when we're in theater versus when we're watching a movie or interacting with media in other ways.
Also, have you ever been at a production or part of a production where something really goes horribly wrong? It's amazing. It's awful. It's like super stressful, but like everyone kind of is like, we're in it. We're in the trenches together. So whatever thing you do to like cover, the audience will instantly applaud because they want you to succeed.
It's glorious. That's the best part. Not necessarily the mess ups, but like I remember when I was doing Romeo and Juliet, and it's right before the balcony scene, and I was like, shall I hear more or shall I speak at this? And it was with high schoolers, and this one kid yelled out. She's like, "Speak at this, bro. She like you." And I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." And it took everything I could not to break because it was hilarious. But but you knew that they were there. They were in it. They knew it. They were right there. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love this idea of alive versus live. I know it's syntactical, and you felt a little like, I don't know that I can pull this word spin jamming on this, and yet
I'm all about
works.
it.
Because like it makes me realize, right? Like part of that is what a lot of these shows, these episodes that we have, the concept of intentionality comes up, and how, the intentionality of doing theater and seeing theater and going, right? Like that there's, you're already in as an audience member if you're there, right? There's some intentionality to that, but also, right, like you're talking about people engagement, people breaking, things going wrong. There's a certain mortality to live theater, or at risk of it, right? Like anything could go wrong, and even there's
Or go right.
Yeah, there are stakes. There are stakes to entering a room where a story is about to be told, and you don't have those same stakes when you're on your couch at home necessarily. I mean, I think that doesn't negate, like, oh my God, the National Theater, this is awesome. I'm in my jammies, in my bed, and a cool autumn breeze is blowing over me, and I get to watch Benedict Cumberbatch do something or whatever, right? Like, but it's not necessarily like, yeah, I mean, we're all here in this moment together. So I don't know. It's tricky, right? Like I want it to be all of it, right? And I guess it can be. Particularly, I think maybe when we go back to this idea with Cassandra, when you were talking about like sacred and ritual worth repeating.
Yeah.
Like that. Go, what?
No, I was just gonna say, like, as I've been thinking about that, and as I've been writing stories back in theater again, of like, what about this is worth repeating? It's also that, like, if you're going to do it as theater, what are your responsibilities to doing it repeatedly and doing it in front of an audience? I mean, obviously there's the Me Too of it, of like, how do we prevent harm from being done on stage, or that a story being told is an excuse to create harm because it's part of the story. Like, talking about Profiles Theater and other places like that, but also just like if you're doing tragedies, if you're doing trauma in your stories, like, is it really worth doing it 4 nights a week for a month plus rehearsals before that? Is it worth having like audiences come in and like potentially traumatize people with that? Like my hot take or question that I've been asking myself a lot is like, there's a reason that the Greeks only did theater once a year. Like, should we be doing theater as much as we are? And I know that is not the great question that people want to be talking about or interacting with when we're having all these articles come out, like New York Times, Chicago Tribune, like theater is dying. How do we keep theater going? And my question is like, what if we did less rather than more? But I do think it goes back to like making it special, making it something that is important that we're showing up for, rather than making it something that's just there, if that makes sense. And I'd love to hear from other people as I go off on this shaky limb by myself.
No, I mean, in business or in anything, supply and demand, so if there's a whole bunch of little black box theaters all telling different stories, it's going to be hard to get, all those black boxes full of people, because it's just so wide out and, spread out. Whereas if you concentrated on one really great show at a big theater, I see what you're saying, because I'm actually struggling with that myself, because I produce live comedy events and live performances, and you get to a point where you're like, am I doing this too much? Do I need to step back and maybe, take a break and then come back in a couple months with a different show or a different concept that people want more, or, are gravitating to more, that's easier to get people to come out to. It really is kind of a struggle always, especially now because everybody's looking at screens, that to be able to really, it is kind of a chore. It's extra to go out, buy an expensive ticket, in some cases, and then go to theater, sit next to, especially after the pandemic, like I think after the pandemic, all of live events and live theater and us coming together was kind of put into perspective and kind of put into, priority, because when we lost it and we didn't know when we were getting it back, that was when it was like, well, let's try and do it on Zoom and figure something, because we didn't know what to do. Because I remember staring in that Armenian's face, doing awkward stand-up comedy, and it was desperate. It was like, are we going to be able to do this thing that we love anymore? Because there's this virus in the air. So I really do think that the pandemic put all of that into perspective. And when you say we should do less, I think it's just, we should do higher quality stuff. It's just like, even the bigger productions like Marvel or anything, like when you do, 100 Disney Plus series instead of one good movie, that's just, people are going to complain about the quality.
You know what? I know so many people, and I'm about to become one of them, who, when everything shut down, they all started Dungeons and Dragons campaigns that are all like still going.
Nice.
And I have a bunch of students who are like, we're gonna make a club, and I was like, I will be one of your advisors. Great, let's do this. and so I'm gonna have to like learn how to do it. What was interesting for me, because I would ask all my friends who are actors, performers, or just like theater artists, I'd be like, what is it? Like, you're spending like 7 hours on a Sunday doing this because you can't do theater, say, and sometimes it was in person, sometimes it was on Zoom. And almost every single person I talked to about it was like, well, we get to build the story together. Like, it's cooperative storytelling. And I feel like I've been thinking a lot lately about that idea of ownership. Like, how can we if we want to get people to think of new forms for theater, like different models, or should the government fund theater? Isaac Butler wrote a really good New York Times op-ed about that. Like, should we have a new federal theater project? And for me, I'm like, it always kind of comes down to ownership. Like, who is going to own this and buy into whatever point of view is being put forward as part of this? Because, like, too much light makes the baby go blind. Like, the ownership of that by the audience is wild, and I'm like, for these D&D campaigns,
and it's immediate.
Yeah. And like, my friends who are doing like D&D, they're like, oh, I got this little my character made. Like, it's been built, it was 3D printed, this is me, I make these choices in the game. And I'm like, wow, that's an intense level of investment. And I'm like, how do we do that? How do we bring the Eras tour and like, Dungeons and Dragons into the theater?
I'm looking at the clock, but I'm also going to take a minute, and I'm going to take a question from the panel here. I'm going to take a question from E.M. Davis from Chicago. They were here last week. What was your most recent joyful experience in the theater, either as an artist or an audience member? And I'm going to ask Miss Cassandra Rose that question. Joyful experience in a theater. Everybody's going to have to take the gift of answering, but
All right. So I've been tiptoeing back into live theater performance and seeing it, especially since I have a partner who is high risk, has some autoimmune disorders. And so like we were very careful during the pandemic. And so we've been very specific about what we chose to come back to. And I decided to start coming back to theater as Hollywood Fringe was happening. And I had a friend doing a show. Lovely Catherine did a show called Grown Up Orphan Annie. And I got to see her one-woman show, and it was 45 minutes, and it was like an absolute fever dream. Because like we're talking about like what the fantasy is. Like if I tell you it's a show about grown-up orphan Annie, I guarantee you the show goes places that you were not expecting. Like she spends a long time talking about like the whale from Free Willy and how she's gonna free the whale that played the whale in Free Willy, and she does a dance on stage with like a blow-up inflatable whale, and then she after it happened, she's like, can I get some notes from you? And I was like, yes, not only are you going to get notes, I'm going to give you so many notes. We're going to get a coffee. We're going to just talk about how to make this weirder, but also like have more of a through line so that like the audience is there to be weird. And then she was like, you're good at this and helpful. You're dramaturg on this now. So like, this was also my joy brought me back to being a dramaturg for the first time in like a decade. I think the last show that I was a dramaturg on was Robin Hood and Maid Marian at Straw Dog to age myself. And then she took the show to Edinburgh and totally rocked it. And like, I just remember being in an audience and being like, yeah, this wouldn't happen in a movie. This wouldn't happen in a radio play, or it might happen in a video game. I'd say there's some weird stuff on Steam, but it wouldn't have been as fun and interactive. And that was also a show that had like you as the audience being a part of it, like helping be her new friends because she was so needy. So there was a lot of buy-in as well. So that's my joyful answer of recent theater. And should I pop it over to somebody else who's not prepared, or do you want to do that, Hank?
I'm going to give that gift to Sarah. Just using it, we're relying back on that old alphabet thing, right? So
yeah. Okay, so I too have been kind of dipping my toe back in, seeing reading and seeing a show here or there. And last Saturday, I saw in the basement of the Chopin, I saw Co-Candy's production of the SpongeBob musical, which I don't even know how to describe it. A good friend of mine, a brilliant Foley artist, Ellie Maitland, did the Foley for that, and so I was going specifically to watch her work, and the thing that I think gave me the most joy was that the actor who played Squidward like moves like an octopus. He's a very tall dude, and so he's like kind of flopping around a little bit, but like simultaneously Ellie is having to make the suction sound of his tentacles, and it just sounds like little farts, and it's just it was such a great, like, because the guy's wearing a button up, he has makeup, his hair is slicked back, he doesn't look like an octopus, but the combination of the sound plus his physical performance, I was like, Squidward is right there. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. It made me laugh every time. It's still on for a couple weekends, I think. It's super fun. I'd highly recommend it.
I think it's just through this weekend. I'm seeing it tomorrow night with my wife and daughter.
Hope she likes it.
Awesome. Yeah, Miss Maitland, friend of ours, friend of the company, fantastic. Eric.
Well, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna plug my special again.
Yeah. I would be almost a little upset if you didn't plug the special again, because if you were like I feel like that's got to be a really
it was crazy. No, to be honest, it really was crazy because it was the first time there was ever an all Filipino American lineup at Lincoln Lodge of stand-up comics, and it was an all Filipino lineup, and I had 2 women on the lineup, which if you know anything about stand-up comedy, they definitely tend to exclude the ladies, and I when I book my shows, I tend to make sure that I include everybody. So I like the idea that I had this all Filipino lineup, and then it was the first time that a Chicago Filipino filmed their special at Lincoln Lodge, and then it was sold out, and then I got a standing ovation at the end, and I've never in all my life Yeah, did my first professional play in 1997, and I've never received a solo by myself on stage, standing by myself, standing ovation, and until my very first comedy special. So I don't know. I can't think of another joyous thing that felt more joyous on stage in a theater experience, because it was like almost a culmination of 20 years of work. So yeah, I'm going to stop talking now because I can feel the lump in my throat developing because I'm getting emotional.
That's good. That's good. Awesome. Mary Winn.
I flew to New York for a business trip and saw a friend's show. Justin Huertas did Lizard Boy for a brief run in New York, and he's been working on that show for a decade, and it was something that I'm struck by in listening to Cassandra and Sarah both, is how proud you feel of your friend watching them, and what an interesting sort of intimacy it is watching a friend and knowing how hard they've worked. And I feel like, Eric, even though you're talking about your own show, like the way that I can hear you feel about the performers you were performing with, like it's such a I have seen shows that I thought were garbage, let's say, but that I wouldn't give up the I wouldn't give up the chance to see in a million years, and it made me feel so good because I was so moved by my friend doing the thing. And I wonder if that's something that we should just come back to always, is like theater education and getting kids in the theater kid to art appreciator pipeline. Get that, just always be aware of it,
That's beautiful, right? Like that idea of, that's go see your friends, but also how do we build in making more friends? Like awesome. All right. So we're getting close to wrapping up. I've got some thank yous to say, and then we're going to come back. So I've got 5 thank yous going to say here. Thank you, and it recognizes me raising my hand. Okay. So thank you, number 1, to Kyle Hammond for creating and producing the show. Thank you, number 2, to officehours.global, Edwin Ruiz, who's here producing the show tonight, and Mondo Machine for helping make it possible. Thank you, number 3. The show is made possible by Straw Dog Theater Company, ensemble members. And Straw Dog is run on a free theater model, and our productions are available to everyone free of charge. Only way we make that happen is through generous donations from our community. So you can find more information about donating at Straw, or becoming a sustaining member, a monthly subscriber, to continuously support our work at strawdog.org. Thank you, number 4, to all the folks who view and watch every week and chime in and participate. Thank you so much, or watch on, archive. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you, number 5, to our amazing panelists for being here this evening and sharing your brilliance. It's awesome. To wrap this up, I want to have everybody throw out book, industry book, script, anything like that along those lines, that's meaningful, that you're reading now, that's like a go-to, a return to, a new, you get it. I'm going to go all the way back. I'm going to go to Sarah again, because I feel like I took a question to Cassandra, so I feel like we've gone all the way around.
Great. So I am halfway through Hell Around Theater Commons, Essays and Conversations from the First 10 Years, 2011 to 2020. And it's been a lot of fun to revisit that, as it's like I read a lot of these essays when they were first published over the years, and to just reflect where we are versus where we've gone, or where we've been, and and just learn to think about theater in a new way, practically, but also theoretically. It's been a good read.
Awesome. Love it. Eric, what do you got?
I'm gonna plug my buddy's book. It's called Brown Enough. He was in Kiss Me Kate. His name is Christopher Rivas, but he wrote this actor's memoir of his struggles with student loans and being a brown Latino actor coming up in Hollywood, and his struggles with that and his acceptance of it. So reading it was like reading my own story, and then it kind of inspired me. I'm here with 3 writers. I'm about to start writing myself. And once the strike is over and I can get paid for it again, I will definitely start writing again. So yeah, but Brown Enough by Christopher Rivas is a great book.
All right. Mary Winn.
I'm gonna do a couple. I'm gonna say Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. More not because it has anything to do with theater exactly, but it is about creative partnerships, and it's an interesting look and often a toxic one, which is sort of also interesting. I'm going to say one that is in my in the age group that I write for, Star-Crossed by Barbara D, for like 8 to 12-year-olds, about a couple of kids who are doing Romeo and Juliet. And the third one I'm going to do is actually not a book. It's a newsletter, and it's called Nothing for the Group, and it's by right, Sarah. It's Nothing for the Group by Lauren Halverson, and a dramaturg in DC. And it is a phenomenal roundup of the theater that's happening in the country, and about it. She lists who is taking over at different theater companies. And then she has a monthly special Bills, where she she and another editor profile someone's bank account, essentially their finances, so that we have a better sense of the sort of equity and privilege and the way that works in our industry. Love that newsletter.
All right. Thank you. Miss Cassandra Rose.
Yes, I am going to go old school, and I am going to encourage folks to hunt down a copy of Underfoot in Show Business by Helene Hanff. Hanff is the last name. She was a playwright in the 40s and 50s, but was never successful. And she wrote a autobiography about not being successful. I read it for the first time when I was in high school. I won't say that it like shaped my feelings about what success was as a playwright, but it definitely helped. Fun fact about her, she actually got like a grant from the Theater Guild to study drama. She was like in the second round of people they gave money to. And this is part of the book where she's like, they said they couldn't just give us money. Like, we had to get training. We had to be brought into a theater. We had to learn our craft, because they had just given money to a guy the year before. And they were like, we didn't feel very successful with that. But like, she and the guy in her cohort, like, never went on to do anything. And the first person they gave money to the year before was Tennessee Williams. And so it's like fun little anecdotes like that. She also had to like put all the exclamation points on the Theater Guild's Oklahoma postcards when they decided to add an exclamation point like a couple nights before it opened. It's so good, guys. It's so good. It's out of print, but you can find ebooks for like $5. Underfoot in Show Business, Helene Hanff.
Wow. I'm just going to say that sounds like it would make a great stage musical. Yeah.
I think there's some people that have tried to adapt it into a play, so you can just hunt them down and add songs.
I love it. Love it. Why not? Hey, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much to all of you for your brilliance and your thoughtfulness and the generosity of your answers, right? I'm glad I got to be in a room with all of you this evening. Some of you I've been in rooms with before, and I can't wait to be in a room with again. Sarah, Eric, I can't wait to be in a room with you. I can't wait to watch the special. Mary Wynn, I can't wait to read
I put it in the chat.
I saw that. Can we share that with other people, like publicly?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, please share,
Right.
share away, please.
Awesome. Fantastic. Then again, I know that the show is just over if I shut up. So the logo will go up. So thank you. There we go.